Hello, and welcome to today's panel exploring whether digital experience has damaged your customer's experience. My name is Hannah Price. I'm the director of the CX practice at DT Consulting, Indegene's strategic arm, and I'll be presenting this topic before introducing our panelists who have kindly agreed to participate in a fireside chat to discuss the core themes in more detail. The QA will be conducted at the end of the session, but please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box that you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. To present this topic, I will now share a few slides. The concept of today's panel came from research that we've been conducting both into HCP experience with pharma organizations and these organizations' current omni-channel capabilities. I suspect that most of the audience have seen an iteration of the graph currently on the screen. Many articles and reports have been written on the shifting channel usage of HCPs through the pandemic. The rapid adoption of digital channels in COVID-19 has accelerated the rise of blended physical and digital approach for HCP interactions. Although there is a yearning by many to shift away from Zoom and return to in-person meetings, the benefits of remote digital interactions mean that the use of these channels will not be going back to post-pandemic levels. HCPs see the value in the flexibility, responsiveness, and the lack of geographic constraint that comes with remote digital interactions and want these to remain a key part of their channel mix, creating a new omni-channel reality for pharma organizations. The preference for these channels is a result that pharma firms should be proud of. It was by no means a small feat in terms of effort or investment to pivot to the use of these channels in a timeframe that was rapid, in an industry that was not used to digitally only customer interactions in a pre-COVID-19 world. Although many pharma firms were setting up digital interaction points, these were primarily self-service channels, such as website or email. Pharma was behind many industries when it came to the use of virtual or digital interactions within the customer experience. With a culture of traditional ways of working and cautious compliance, often stifling the ability to pivot and develop new digitally enabled customer experiences. COVID-19 created an urgent need to quickly deliver remote interactions. Channels that allowed for MSLs and reps to connect with HCPs and for seminars and congresses to still go ahead. HCPs across the board have responded well to the introduction of these channels, and as we can see from the data points displayed here, have recognized the enhancements to the quality of these experiences. Pharma organizations have focused on the internal requirements for the delivery of virtual and digital interactions. We have seen this from an assessment we have conducted into the adoption of best practices for the core customer-facing capabilities. However, the rapid delivery of these channels comes at a cost. As store-based retailers found out when they had to quickly develop digital channels to compete with their new online competitors, often the fastest way to deliver a digital presence is in a silo. Teams focused on creating the best experience for one channel, with the strategy, design, execution, and measures being produced with the minimal number of dependencies and alignment to broader programs that slows them down. This expediency can result in disjointed experiences, which often require a larger effort post-digital channel go-live for the retroactive stitching together of an omni-channel customer experience. It is this scenario that many pharma firms have found themselves in. They have developed a new set of digital channels, but without a comprehensive customer-centric strategy on how these channels will work together. We have seen this from the assessment we have conducted into the adoption of best practices for the core back-end capabilities, particularly channel integration and CX management. Without a clear plan of an internal operating model that sits behind these channels, pharma firms will find themselves trying to piece together a broken experience, whilst not being able to take advantage of the many opportunities that a blended digital and physical model should be delivering from a customer, employee, and business perspective. So how do you identify if your customer experience is broken? There are 4 key areas that we will explore. Number 1, customer understanding. In an engagement model where reps drive interactions to HCPs, the customer understanding could be at the tip of the spear, with good reps ensuring that content and pharma company interactions were relevant to a specific HCP's needs. This understanding now needs to be disseminated across the organization. All teams producing content and developing engagement channels need to have a clear understanding of customer needs, behaviors, and the interaction history with the organization. Employees need the right tools and training to be able to leverage this insight into decision-making. If an HCP is not receiving email content that is relevant to them based on their current needs or goals that they have shared with their rep, then the experience is broken. Or if an HCP has declined an invite by a rep to a seminar, but then still receives an email invite to the same seminar via the events team, then the experience is broken. Number 2, content development. Within the content development process, there's still excessive amounts of content waste and redevelopment. This can happen when content has not been created within a design process that considers how customers will want to consume the content or will be able to due to the constraints of their environment. If an HCP cannot access specific platforms on the device of their choice or can't connect to virtual or digital experiences easily in their current environment, and in either case, they're not being provided with an alternative, then the experience is broken. Number 3, experience design. One of the greatest advantages of digital channels is that you can scale your service model to HCPs in a way that is not achievable without an unlimited resource budget for reps. After you've created an email or prepared for a webinar, the incremental cost of sharing that with 100 HCPs versus 1,000 HCPs is generally negligible. This, however, can be one of the greatest disadvantages of digital channels. Teams that are measured on the number of eyeballs on content, not the value of that content to the recipient, are incentivized to keep on sending content to the widest audience possible. This can lead to engagement fatigue. If an HCP can receive content from within multiple teams from within inside the organization without there being a clear engagement plan that all teams are following and can track, then the experience is broken. Number 4, experience enablement. Developing a well-integrated set of platforms for customer experience is one of the biggest challenges within the omnichannel model. The governance process and development time required to achieve this is often too slow for commercial teams. This leads to workarounds that create siloed systems, and in some cases, the use of platforms that have not been approved by centralized IT teams. The impact to the user, both employee and customer, can be disjointed experiences where there's a greater level of manual input required to achieve goals than should be necessary. If an HCP has logged into a Pharma portal, asked a question via a search engine or chatbot, and then has had to ring up a call center and ask their question again, then the experience is broken. To continue the discussion on exploring whether digital acceleration has damaged customers' experiences, we will now move to the fireside chat. I'm delighted to introduce today's panelists who come from a wide range of CX professional backgrounds with a broad range of experience that I'm sure means that they'll all bring their own unique take to this topic. So please welcome our panelists. Anuj, Vice President, HCP and Patient Marketing Enablement, Pfizer. Mark, Global Omnichannel Lead, Sanofi. Robin, Global RX Omnichannel and Customer Engagement Lead, Galderma. And Rorik, Worldwide Omnichannel Capability Lead, BMS. Thank you for all joining us today. So let's begin. As discussed in the presentation, customer experience being disrupted or diminished by the pace of digital acceleration isn't a phenomenon that is unique to the pharma industry. First question to Robin. What experiences in other industries or adjacent industries have you seen where CX has been jeopardized by a period of fast digital acceleration?
Yeah, I think that this is not unique to pharma. This is really unique to both large companies that have many divisions, often with competing interests when talking to the same company, but small companies as well, or smaller companies, are also not exempt. So the real issue here is it's first and foremost a change management issue. And the change management has to come as you identify what CRM technology you really need to implement, and then how are you going to utilize it within the company. So what it involves at a base level is getting everybody onto the same page. You're all talking in a case where you are talking to the same customer. And even, Hannah, to your earlier point about how do you just make sure that you give a great 360 experience, even when there's one brand or one division talking to a customer. So not limited, but it really comes down to everybody getting on the same page, sometimes evaluating which customers are priorities for which products, even during which months, and then organizing that as you create and distribute your content. So not an easy task, lots of moving parts, everything from content generation and management to creating new ladders for your sales team as they evaluate clients, getting all of that into the CRM, and then making sure everybody is on board with it. So unique across industries.
Great, thank you, Robin. And to that point that it does go across industries, Mark, same question to you. Where have you seen this occur in other industries?
So yeah, I couldn't agree more with Robin there. You know, customer experience it is so important for many industries and many verticals. And you know, I come from the hotel industry, so we were just, everything was about the customer. I mean, every customer experience, right, was focused on making sure we optimize that. And one of the things that sort of I learned, this is a quote I always kind of kept in mind, was, you know, I've learned that people will forget what you said, right? People will forget what you did, but people never forget how you made them feel. And I think we always kind of have to remember that across whatever vertical you're in, whatever industry you're in. The first example I can kind of give, and I think this is near and dear to everyone's heart, is around telehealth. You know, telehealth is so interesting, right? It's been happening for a while, but COVID really pushed it into the forefront. And what's interesting around telehealth is that great idea, however, not executed so easily, right? From a customer experience standpoint. My own personal experience, this is kind of interesting. Questions, well, how do I pay? Is this free? Do I go to a waiting room? How do I pay for this? Oh, you're on mute. I can't see you. You froze. And it's so interesting, and just even watching my own family. So great idea, right? Telehealth is here to stay. There's no question. Corinne Legoff mentioned it this morning, right? It's going to transform everything, but you got to match the customer experience with the technology. So that's just one example. I have one other example I'm going to give, and some of you may disagree with me, but Walmart, okay? Everyone is trying to match Amazon. We all know that. They're sort of the standard, if you will, right? And Walmart didn't have a choice. They had a match, right? They had to go head to head with Amazon. But I'll tell you something, easy to order with Walmart, right? Big box store, but from a customer experience standpoint, not the best. And in terms of how they ship the product, how you return a product, how they ship it in the box itself, some of you again may disagree, but it's not been a great experience. So those are just two examples where CX was definitely sort of jeopardized by a period of fast digital acceleration.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. I love that. A great digital idea, but then not executed in a great way for customers. And to that point, kind of what experiences have you seen with Inside Pharma where we have seen that kind of pattern emerge recently?
Sure, Hannah. I think it's some of the similar analogies to what Mark gave so wonderfully. I think it applies to some of the things in pharma as well. And I'll draw the attention to a particular sort of idiosyncrasy that I've seen within pharma, and quite often what tends to happen within pharma is that it's actually the technology that spurs the conversation that says, oh, wow, this is something different, right? Because whether it's something about interacting with a customer in a non-traditional setting, or interacting with them in an omnichannel way. Some aspects of tools and technologies do definitely spur the thinking forward. What new content might be needed? What does this open for us? But quite often what tends to happen is that all of a sudden the CX journey, or the customer experience journey, falls second to that tool and technology, and it starts pushing, right? And then after that, it becomes all of a sudden, then it becomes, how do we get this tool, technology, process in all of the different markets, all of the different units that we have, and scale it, right? But really what falls by the wayside and what really jeopardizes the journey is that within pharma, you are not dealing with the same type of customer, whether you're an organized customer working in a hospital, working with GPOs, whether you're an oncologist, whether you're in internal medicine dealing with a lot of general therapy, your needs are different. What drives your experience is absolutely different. That falls on pharma in a very, very specific way, because you're not necessarily also engaging in a B2C kind of a way. It's a different industry, right? You're really definitely trying to make the right product, the right content at the right customer at the right time. Not necessarily like so much like fill your Amazon cart, right? So I think that what tends to, the two things that what I've observed is that when technology gets ahead of the process, it gets ahead of the strategy, that's a dangerous sign. And the second one is when you're not able to have a clear understanding of how your customer experience is going to be uniquely your customer experience, right? So the tools, technologies, processes will actually form as enablers, but sometimes the two kind of get swapped, and then after that, that's where a lot of problems come up.
Thank you. I love that. CX falling second, and then having a very kind of complex customer experience, and then trying to differentiate that customer experience and even taking it to that next level. Rorik, have you seen something similar inside Pharma and some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, definitely. And Anusha, I'm going to build on what you've been sharing as well, more from a technology perspective, right? That technology push. I think across many of our ex-US markets, we've seen, of course, yes, a push around technology, but also a certain need to keep on pushing the messages together with sometimes not the right customer experience KPIs, metrics, or however you want to call them. Still, this more push like a model that we try to persuade. Well, we should already be in that more pull mode, right? Really understanding what a customer needs and delivering on that. We've seen examples in certain areas where replicate emails, for example, became the norm for almost every piece of communication. So not even doing a step back, considering what are the preferences, what are the communication, information, and other needs from an HCP, but just making sure that a message gets delivered. The same for remote engagement, which was new for parts of the field force, but also not to be underestimated for some of the HCPs that we try to engage with throughout this pandemic. And last but not least, we saw creative workarounds in the field, but also from office teams finding their own channels to keep on engaging with physicians, which is of course with the best intent possible, but not sustainable on the longer term, and leaves us with a tricky black gap in our data and customer experience.
So if we see that push coming through, and like you said, there's definitely is still a push of these channels and a way of working coming through in terms of the fact that digital is not going anywhere now. It's now part of this model. Rep trading emails was the first kind of maybe breach over the bow, and now we have a lot more digital channels coming through. What are some of the things that you think organizations can do to weigh up the benefits of some of these kind of more pushes through in an organization of saying, we need to digitally transform, we need to enhance our digital tools, but at the same time, thinking about that risk to customer experience? Back to you, Rorik.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, right, it was almost like a perfect storm. I think that the need for digital was almost undisputed. And I think almost every pharma CEO referenced the great efforts that our digital teams did to keep them going and keep on engaging with patient, HCPs, and other stakeholders in what was referred to as the new reality. And although I personally prefer to talk about the customer-centric transformation, I think many of our digital transformations got the needed tailwind with support from the top, additional resources and investments. And I think all of that is extremely helpful. But to your point, I think there's a big risk in wanting to do too much and too fast. And I think what really helped me and many of our teams is to have a close watch on what we hear from the teams involved, right? I think Robin talked about that earlier in the session, making sure that everybody is on that same page. So making sure that we have a good understanding about what's happening in the field and at the office, but also what our HCPs are telling us. And especially when we start thinking about engaging those HCPs remotely or digitally, there's a lot of data directly available. And I think if we focus on that data and embrace a sort of fill fast and learn fast mindset, we can learn fast, we can fill fast, but also course correct where needed. And I think that's still the beauty of working with digital and can prevent us from scaling things that aren't truly customer centric, but making sure that we do it right with the right set of metrics that focus A, internally, and B, on our customers and on that customer experience.
Brilliant, thank you, Rorik. And to pick up on that point around the people element of this, and Robin, going back to your first thoughts around change management, how have you seen some of that way up being done in terms of digital acceleration versus that risk to customer experience?
Yeah, so I think let's take probably the most common thing that everyone has done on this call is a website and some kind, as Rorik said, rep triggered email. So from other industries, again, same thing. I was at Citibank where people were sending willy-nilly emails to the same customers, pitching different brands, right, with no governance whatsoever. Now, governance is not easy to do in a pharma for reasons you just described. Everybody is under the same edict, different business units, different leadership levels to put digital into play. So this is truly the hard part because we all know what the right thing is to do. The hard part is figuring out, and I would recommend you start with one area. Rep triggered email is probably the easiest because everybody does it and it has the most potential to be, let's say, used in the wrong way, in a way that is not presenting the company's best foot to the customer. So even if you wanted to try a pilot, right, call it a change management pilot, where you would take 2 or 3 different senders, let's put it that way. It could be different brand teams, it could be different field forces. You sit them down and you put together a metrics plan that says, we're going to help you understand which of your communications have been working best, and then help you optimize based on the data. So it's done in a way, though, that the goal is to make everybody look good in the end, not to say, I'm going to get to send more of my brand emails, right, than the guy next door, because whether or not it's converting at some level, right, work, that's where you're going, it doesn't matter. People just need to be able to document. Who hasn't had to put in one of those either quarterly or monthly, right? Like, here's what I've achieved in the next 4 weeks. And if what you've achieved is, look, I took my newsletter out of the market, you're going to have the data to back that up. And also what you then changed it with, because you still have to have a digital way to reach your customers. So that's kind of one down and dirty way to get a corrective pilot into the market. But you really got to have, you have to be pretty strong because you're going to get a lot of blowback.
Thank you, Robin. Metrics and measures driving behaviors, goals driving behaviors. These are the things I think we all see day to day with inside organizations are really kind of changing the way that we work in terms of this is, it comes down to what people's goals are, what they're being measured on. Mark, have you seen ways that we can think about measuring the benefits of digital acceleration, both in the immediate and long term on the customer experience versus potentially the damage in the short term to customer perception, to kind of build on Robin's point about being able to go back to the business and saying, this is why we're making this action, this is why we're working in this way, because we think it will create a better experience?
Yeah, I can't. So measurement is such a great topic. And what's really important here, and Robin made a good point there, what's really important is that we need to have a voice of customer program. right? We've got to be measuring customer experience. And I'm not talking about just impact ROI, but we've got to have a plan in place in terms of, quality scores, right? Satisfaction scores like CSAT, right? You've got loyalty scores. Are they going to return, right? Advocacy, NPS, you've got trust and relevance around things like CXQ. And then of course, ROI around value. What's interesting is that what we've got to make sure is as we implement, digital channels, right? We've got to make sure that they're not done, and everyone's saying this, they're not done in silos, right? The channels are orchestrated with the rep. And some may say, well, the digital scores are lower than rep. Well, if that's the case, and we're hearing that, then we've got other issues around getting back to the basics of omni-channel, right? We've got to all make sure that we give our doctors what they want, when they want it, how they want it, when they want it. We've got to make sure that our channels are orchestrated, right? And we've got a seamless experience. And we've got to always capture and lead with data, right? Data, right? Will help our customer experience. And then we've got to make sure, and Robin said this as well, or someone said this, the channels, right? You've got to implement them with excellence, right? You can't send too many emails, right? You've got to have the right relevant content, et cetera. And content, I can't say enough about content, making sure that's optimized. And measurement, you've got to continuously measure what you're doing so you could test and learn and do better the next time.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. I think that's a great point that you mentioned on the fact that digital channels do seem to, at the moment, be still coming back consistently with lower satisfaction scores than some of the face-to-face channels that we have. And when we're going much more towards a digital blended model, that obviously is going to have some bigger impacts on your overarching customer perception that you see inside your voice of the customer program. And you're just wondering if you've had any kind of experience in having to deal with that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love Mark's data war cry. This is a topic that you could probably you could probably spend days on, right? But as it comes to figuring out what your measurement plan should be and how do you marshal the effectiveness of your overall program, to me it boils down to three things, right? And less is more in this, right? The first one is understanding how you're progressing towards your overall strategic outcomes, right? Not the near term, right? ROI could be one of them, but it's like, what are the things that you're going to try to do? Very often companies are engaging in this digital transformation so that you get a greater flexibility of interactions. Okay, so then after that's actually a goal to say that how many customers have you interacted with across different channels, right? These are nuanced, but has to be specific towards what you think good looks like, right? Think about the end. If you're going to say that we're going to be successful, what are those 2-3 things that really resonate with your senior leadership, and track them on an ongoing basis, right? Like create goals out of them and track them. So that's all about the strategic outcomes. That's the first one. The second one, and I think it was mentioned a couple of times, measure the customer experience, right? What are people saying? Whether it's simple things like whenever you have a digital interaction, what is that satisfaction? Get the verbatims back on saying that what do they not like, what do they like, what do they not like. That is useful to an extent to just know, but also what makes it sing is that you need a business process to actually take that feedback and then improve the next time, right? So there you have to have something around effectiveness with your customer. And the third one, which maybe what we touched on a little bit, but I believe strongly that efficiency off of your engagements, right? That's a huge driver. And I think you started this question by saying that sometimes if your digital engagement scores are lower, well, then does it actually help you gain at least impressions, or where are they lower? Why are they lower? But actually, at the end of the day, it's against what baseline were you measuring it towards, right? You can't actually, like, not all the interactions are created equal, right? So if you're actually not creating a score which actually has an upside because you're interacting with that customer with a digital channel that you would not have interacted with at all, right? Then there's a story to be said about that. Maybe that's not terrible, but again, like it's thinking about what is the efficiency with which you're doing that, right? Like before, you're only reaching customers with a very high cost per interactions, but now if you're having more frequent interactions with them through digital channels, non-personal engagements, there's something to be said about that, right? And also, like, one of the things that you want to be doing is understanding how efficiently your ecosystem is working, right? Because if your route to personalization takes like a month to circle around, right? An interaction from last month has an impact, or has only having an impact now on your next customer engagement, that's probably not as great. What the demand is for like now, right? Like I clicked on a website today, tomorrow there should be some sort of there could be some sort of a connected email in my inbox, right? Like that's the experience that we're going to go for. So that's the third area where I would think like operational efficiency of your ecosystem, that can be measured, and was something that I've seen help the organizations move forward.
Brilliant, thank you. And I love that idea that channels aren't equal, and maybe we are doing a disservice to our digital channels by trying to stand them up against face-to-face channels and thinking that they can perform to the same level, or that we should ever expect them to perform at the same level. So kind of go back to some of the points that we spoke about at the beginning. If we accept that these risks are part of the digital transformation journey, and we know that other industries have really pushed forward faster than we have when it comes to digital transformation, as mentioned at the beginning, hotel, retail, telehealth, other industries have had to go through this period of fast digital acceleration and have come out the other side. Robin, from your experience, how have other industries kind of done that, kind of mitigated against this issue?
So I think that I'm not sure all industries have done it. I think it's really more of a divide between B2C and B2B. I think that on the B2C side, it's been done really well, and Mark gave a lot of great examples, right? Amazon, clearly a leader, although I don't even think Amazon's at the pinnacle of customer service. There's a difference, right, between doing a really strong CRM where you're getting the information I need in front of me and doing a good job with customer service, and there has to be a blend of the two. B2C clearly ahead. On the B2B side, which is where I think, we have some patient interactions as well, but I think most of this is on, let's say for now, the pharma to HCP side of the equation. It's still a little bit nascent for the reason that a lot of these digital channels are being stood up for the first time. But Anuj, I have seen a little bit different. I agree with you that the bar needs to be different or better calibrated when you're benchmarking face-to-face visit against a digital visit. But digital, and some of what I've seen, including at Galderma, really is an effective tool for customers who perhaps don't get seen very much or who you're trying to onboard. So prospects you're trying to onboard as customers. And we've done a couple of tests where we looked at this, and what we found is that sometimes an audience that's really new to a product may be just as willing to open that email from a rep they don't know as somebody who is at kind of the top of your adoption ladder. So it just takes a lot of testing. And Hannah, to your point, what I've seen in other industries and what I've seen in pharma is just a willingness to start with pilots where you have a very clear goal of what it is that you want to achieve. I want to make sure that for this subset of HCP that I'm providing them with the best holistic experience that I can. I understand all of my touch points across channels, and I also have a clear goal. So if it's at the lower end of that conversion ladder, right, you're trying to get them from 0 to 10% adoption. If it's at your higher end of that conversion ladder, right, you're trying to take them from whatever benchmark to whatever new. You can do it across existing products. You can do it across soon to launch products. You can do it products that are still on patent along with your heritage brands. What I think the best thing to do is just identify a project that works for your organization at this time, totally customer centric, right? The goal is you're trying to increase that share of voice, but do it in a way that is very customer centric, which means, as we've said here, trying to figure out what is the best information to get to that customer, what's the best channel to do it in, and how am I keeping track, and if you're multi-brand or multi-message, that it's playing nicely with everything else I need to get in front of this customer. Now, that's a little bit at a high level. Customer 360 is still holy grail. If anybody truly thinks they've been able to do this, right, we'd love to hear about it. Contact Hannah and we can have another panel on that, but it's still baby steps and you're gonna have to learn into it.
You heard it here first, Customer 360 panel. That'll be the next Indegene event coming out with this. Pilots and small projects. Rorik, have you seen something similar where you can, inside the organization, take something small, but then look at it at a much more holistic customer-centric point of view, or other kind of examples that you've seen where people have tried to kind of mitigate against these types of issues?
Yeah, definitely, Hannah. And before I'm going to share some examples about mitigating risk, I'd love to build a bit on what Robin has been saying, because to your point, we have been seeing already in major markets outside of the US that we need to have digital first, right, before we can actually send our rep in. And that is almost flipping the model. And to your point around pilots, these are the pilots that we've been doing, finding out indeed in the oncology therapeutic area, for example, where are these doctors, what are their information needs, and really flipping the model, digital, email first. And when the time is right, when the interest is there, it's time for us to send in the rep to have that more in-depth conversation around the topic that the physician actually wants. So I think that's already the reality in some of the major markets as well, Robin. So I think that's a great example. Back on to your question around mitigating risks. Yeah, I'm a big believer of what I shared before around that fail fast and learn fast. And if you bring that together with that data-driven mindset, it becomes easier to set up new channels which sometimes aren't integrated yet, right, in your overarching customer engagement model. But I think if you're able to understand the customer needs in a new reality or in the current reality, starting with market research to identify their information needs or other preferences that they have, combined with actual engagement data, one can rapidly learn and see if channels are even worth scaling, and to a certain degree how content is resonating. So what did we measure to go to that next level of detail, for example, to make it a bit more tangible? We started to look at the reach, very simple, but of course we also focused on real engagement and delivery of key messages across these preferred channels of the physicians. We measured not only the delivery, but also to a certain degree the acceptance of messages related to the HCP segmentation, and sometimes even more important, to where they are in their own journey or the adoption ladder. And I think, yes, that comes with a lot of failures, but I think importantly, it comes also with a ton of learnings, which we try to share broadly across the functions and our markets.
So from experience, I'd say that pharma generally isn't fond of failure as a cultural concept. It's not kind of ingrained inside its DNA that it might be in some other industries. How do you find kind of bringing in that type of way of working inside the organizations?
I think it's exposing the reality, and if you're really honest about what's happening, and if you're able to really bring the right data forward, these are just very valuable learnings. And whether that's a failure or a missed opportunity, I think it depends on how strong you can make that change, and if you can bring in the data from an employee perspective who is involved, right? It might be the field force, or it might be the office involved, combined with what we are directly hearing from our physicians. I think that's very often, if you set it up properly, if you measure it properly, just a very strong case. And whether that's a failure or a success, I think we should really be discussing both.
Thank you. Anuja, I saw you nodding to that. Have you seen kind of similar examples from your experience?
Yeah, a funny thing about failure and pharma not ever failing. I think it's just always it's always just progress towards it, right? So the aspects that I've seen recently, and it's actually been very refreshing to see this, is taking more of a quote unquote agile mindset, right? Off of saying that you have a very big aggressive goal, but rather than take that sequential step towards off of saying, I know what the problem is today, and I'm going to set for a requirements gathering. Then after that, you're going to go develop it, and then after that, then you deploy it maybe at small scale, and then you go at large, right? Usually, this end-to-end process for any decent sized problem, it often takes a year, right? But then after that, with this fast-changing world, you're already out of date when you think you're going to launch, right? So flattening out that process and breaking it into these sprints, right, where you meander expand it a little bit more around what it is. But then what you do is that you actually like bring your end consumers again. Now, it could be it could be something with your marketing team, so that you're thinking constructively about the channels and the content at the same time, saying that how do these two things kind of connect together. Or if the situation arises where you actually just pull in your end customers, your physicians, patients, whatever the case may be, and pull them into the design process, right? So there, it's not your cycle, your usual cycle times of like months before you see a wireframe and a prototype. Nah, it's gonna be like, today we talked about something, within 1 week from now you're seeing something that you can react to. And again, like, it becomes less of a failing that pilot, but then after that, it's just feedback that goes on to like list of features that needs to be addressed. So there's something to be said about like inculcating and pulling some of that into a lot of what we do as an industry, right? And think about like those stepwise approaches, right? That really, I think it might take you longer potentially to get to a full-blown product, but I think what we've seen is that does give you your results to be a little bit more solid, and there's less unknowns at the end of the whole thing, right? Because as you're going through, as you're actually then thinking about what is the thing that's going to hold us back, and you're attacking that problem really early, versus like taking care of all of the, usually what tends to happen in the pilots is that you actually think about like the best case scenario, and it's like, I know there's this big elephant in the room, I'm gonna just hang on until we prove this concept out. This way you just chip away at it as you go with the process. So to say, like, thinking agile and co-developing with your end customer community or whatever that might be is good. Is some of the things that I've seen really help draw down the risk.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think some of the solutions we're seeing coming through are going to digital first with some of the smaller pilots, thinking about the use of agile, bringing in data, all things that I would say are very good things that companies which are digital first or have got a more of a digital embedded within inside their DNA are better at doing. Mark, do you think organizations that have been historically focused on physical channels, when they're shifting towards an omni-channel operating model, struggle to set this up in the right way that they don't harm the customer experience more so than maybe some of their digital first counterparts?
I do. What's kind of interesting, and kind of what you're referring to is sort of operating models. And what we need to do in pharma is really rapidly transform how we work, rapidly transform how we operate, right? We've got to really, and I'm not about pilots. When it comes to CX, to me, it is not about pilots. It's about doing this in a very agile way, right? We do not have a choice. Customers are expecting us to transform now. We don't have time for the old legacy in terms of pilots, wait and see. And Anusha's right, it's about agility and sprints and doing it quickly. So when it comes to things like the operating model, right, it's got to change. And the problem with pharma right now is that we started as brand in the middle. Now what we're doing is transforming to customer in the middle. Now it sounds easy on paper, right? We all have the same PowerPoint slides, trust me, but it's not easy. And there's a lot of reasons why it's not easy. And one of the things that we need to start thinking about is part of the operating model. CX, right, is not a bolt-on. You can't have all of a sudden marketing, operations, and CX. No, CX has to be embedded in everything that you do, right? In marketing and operations, back-end operations, et cetera. The other thing with CX from an operating model standpoint too is that you've got to have a culture of measurement. You've got to show the value, because if you don't show the value of CX, people are going to treat it as a bolt-on. And that's a big transformation we need to have as well. The other thing and last thing I want to say around this, around operating model, is that, when the brands are doing their objectives and imperatives, right, CX has to have a seat at the table, right? That conversation, right, all of the strategies, all of the tactics have to have CX embedded in it. It should never be that bolt-on. And then the last thing I want to say, sorry, I keep on saying last thing, is data. If you don't have data, if you don't know how to enable data, if you don't know how to take insights into action, that's the issue. And what we all need to do is be better at data. We need to operationalize data. We need to own the data, because if you think about it, our data is our currency, right? Data is our differentiation, and you've got to get that right. So all of that in terms of what I said, and believe me, there's much more, is sort of our journey to get this right from an operating model standpoint. It's not easy.
Brilliant, thank you. So operating models with customers at the center, but data permeating everything and everything we look to do. We're now just going to open up the session to a few questions from the audience. One question that has come in is around how big the consideration should be on the employee experience when we think about digital acceleration. So we've talked about the end customers, our HCPs and our patients, but what about the employees who are living and working with our systems? Robin, kind of going back to some of the points that you were mentioning earlier, where do you see employees fitting into that process, and especially if we're trying to get their buy-in at the same time as part of their change management role?
Yeah, exactly. And Rourke's laughing. I mean, you can't do any of this if you do not enable your employees to pull this off. So it's a lot of moving pieces. And really the best way to do it is to sit down and identify. And Mark, I think I disagree with you on pilots. It's hard to, you're not going to get there. You're not going to prove to some folks who are really rooted in the old ways how they're going to get to where they need to be unless you can do it in small chunks with influencers within the company, right? Talk about digital influencers within the company who are going to, or people who just put their foot down. I'm at the point where I just put my foot down and I tell people the way it needs to be, right? We don't need to gently bring them into digital anymore. It's here. So we need to guide them on what you need to do. So the employees have to have the right tools. We can't say to them, get from point A to point B using spreadsheets. Big CRMs are really difficult to hook up for large B2B companies, often because you have to integrate with third-party technologies, right? One we all use shall remain nameless. You can't have a CRM if you, right? That's going to track all interactions unless you're using your core CRM, which is what your field force uses to track all of their appointments and know who's who and know who their customers are. So the folks who are going to be doing this work day in and day out, you need to start with them. They need to opine in a very simplistic, bullet pointed way about what technology they need. And then everybody has to work together, including with finance, to understand, you know, can I get by with the Chevy or do I really need the Cadillac version, right? Pfizer looking at you with the Cadillac.
Brilliant. Thank you, Robin. Anish, do you want to add to that?
Thanks.
Not a Tesla.
Yeah, Mark, you can have the Tesla.
I just wanted to agree with Robin. I think like it's I think like part of what this is, and the employees and colleagues are a core aspect of this, right? When you think about what you need in order to make this really sing, you're touching just about every part of a commercial organization. You have marketing, you have sales, you have technology, digital, you have operations, you have marketing, right? Like all of these, like when you think about what's going to be required, it's a full court press, and there's going to be greater teamwork that's going to be required than ever before. So every group has their own change journey to go under. I think a critical part of it is a little bit of both of what I think what Robin described of saying like, bang, this is what's going to be required for the future, being almost like unapologetic and saying that this is what's going to be transitioned towards, but then also at the same time nurturing people along the way, because one thing is going to happen, which is I have a feeling that this is just going to be a continuous learning journey, right? Like what we think is the gold standard right now, probably 2 years from now, things are going to be changing, right? Like, and I don't know what those are going to be. I have a hunch and I have a hope, but then after that, you've got to be continually with your ear to the marketplace as far as what the changing trends are, identifying what those skills and development criteria are, whether it's really engaging in like wider unstructured conversations with groups, pulling people in softer skills or harder skills, right? Like who knows, man, like are coding skills going to be required in order to, how do you bring things up into these different things? Is that going to be a core part of marketing? I don't know, but those are the sort of some of the things where I think in a way that's greater than ever before, this is going to have to become a learning journey for an entire commercial organization. So having that learning agility baked into your core DNA and finding the right way to support it and channel it, I think is going to be critically important.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anush. So we're in our last minute. So if we just do a rapid fire round each of the members of the panel, one, potentially 2 words. What is the key action now that people should take to make sure that they are creating a blended experience and not a broken experience? Starting with Mark.
Get your omnichannel right. Get the data right and measure. 100%.
Perfect, thank you. Rorik?
Focus on your voice of the employee, listen carefully to what your customers are saying, and voice of the business will follow.
Brilliant. And Robin? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yikes, at least didn't happen until the end. Yeah, I agree. And it's, you know, to boil it down 2 words, customer 360, however you can get there.
And Anush?
I'll take 3, customer-centric strategy.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for all of the panelists for taking part today. Hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you all.